budget. And Dr. Cobb, would you give our invocation, please?
Lord, we humbly come to you and ask for your guidance and wisdom and all the important things we need to do today. We ask that you watch over the families of the 9/11 victims, all our soldiers everywhere in the world and their families. And once again, we ask for your wisdom and guidance. Amen.
Roll call, please.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Cherokee Watts. Bill Anglin.
Here.
Bill John Baker.
Here.
Harley Buzzard.
Here.
Julia Coates. Here. Brad Cobb. Joe Crittenden.
Here.
Jody Fishinghawk. Here. Meredith Brady.
Here.
Janelle Fulbright.
Here.
Don Garvin. Chuck Hoskin Jr. Tana Gloria Jordan.
Present.
Curtis Snell.
Here.
Chris Soap. David Thornton.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Okay. What I would like to do beginning this morning is continue the revenue overview of the entire budget that Doug is presenting. But what we'd like to do is for Doug to go through this entire overview, and then that will give us an idea of the entire budget, of what's in it and the differences. And then we will go to the other tabs, such as 01 for the Chief's Office, 02 for the Tribal Council, Judicial Branch, Education, so all the departments. And at that time, all the consolidated figures will be there together. And at that time, I would prefer that we wait until then to make the motions or any amendments to the budget. But first we'll get the overview and then we'll go through the detail after that. Doug.
Mr. Chairman.
Is that pretty much the way we had in mind there?
I think that'll work good. We can always, after the divisional reviews, we can always go back to that level 3 tab where those detailed discretionary funds are broken out, and if there needs to be any further discussion on that, then we always go back there. Mr. Chair, do you want me to go ahead and go into the groups at this point, or finish what we started yesterday with these discretionaries?
Finish what we started yesterday with discretionary, and then continue with the revenue items.
Somewhere around page 30.
29, 30.
Well, wasn't it page 30 that we were?
Yes.
We had just finished talking about, no, we got page
Actually,
through
we were.
30.
We were 32, yes.
Level 3. $32?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We had it. That's right. That was the service school was that was the last thing that was added. Okay. Okay. The cultural program, we mentioned listening to the elders initiative, and the immersion and the comprehensive cultural center both have significant funding increases for 06, $286,000 for the cultural center and $720,000 for the immersion project. Slight decrease on the JOM special project, 12%. 26% decrease on the Cherokee Helping Initiate Progress. The next page, we'll see the electronic dental record initiative that was mentioned, $866,000. Special project. You can see the removal of the special projects from last year's health initiatives of the electronic health record and the database consolidation project. Looks like they have a little bit anticipated finalizing of the medical coding and document imaging project for 08 to wrap that up. And obviously that stands out is the nearly $6 million removal of the cancer diabetes treatment and prevention. The clinical support services is significantly affected here as well. There's two groups here that obviously are sticking out on Gen Fund.
Yes.
Could I ask one question?
Yes.
On that cancer and diabetes treatment and prevention, that's been zeroed out?
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, 1.8 is going back in from the tobacco surtax. This is where,
This is where the 1.8 goes?
yes.
See, which is why I said if we wait till the end and we'll consolidate them all in the health, when we get to tab 7 on the health services, then we'll consolidate all the funding sources into that, and we'll have a better detail of what's actually been cut and what hasn't.
Yeah, and I might make a point if I could, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman. Sometimes what we might see, now it'll happen in here, is you'll see a funding shift. And you won't see the whole picture by only looking at the general fund. You'll see a big increase or a big decrease, and it's because the funding has shifted over to IHS or shifted over to interest on our compact, or things like that can happen in this budget. That's why when we get into the health, that's when you'll get the complete picture if there's funding shifts. If, for instance, the rest of this normal funding for cancer and diabetes treatment is being subsidized out of the IHS compact, we'll see it when we get into the health department. So we'll get into that. Those will be together. Those funding sources will be together on that health report. And I think we'll be able to see the whole picture for that division. Or you'll also be able to see if it's not there. Okay. The clinical support services within the health department, again, has got a significant decrease with $5.4 million, going from $7 million down to $1.6, and the three categories again are the cancer, contract health cancer treatment, the denture and eyeglass MRF, and the contract health subsidy that was funded in 2007. The community health preventive service department in the health group is decreasing 25% or $365,000, with the lion's share of that being the removal of the detox center feasibility study of $470,000. They are offsetting that a little bit with an increase in the community recreation center, and I believe that 1010-249 budget right there, community recreational center, the Marcoma, the gym, the new property at Marcoma, that rec center over there, they're trying to get up and running for a community center. That's health services. The financial resource group in general fund also has some significant budget requests in it. It's increasing $3.5 million with the $2 million increase to our contingency reserve. The contingency reserve looks like it's tripling in size, but I need to point out it started at $3 million this year and was taken down to fund some activities in 2007 that weren't contemplated in the comprehensive budget. So we're restoring, Callie's asking to be restored back to the previous contingency level of $3 million. She's also asking for the reserve for the indirect cost negotiations. Again, that's the negotiations with the Inspector General for our indirect cost proposal, where they've made an opinion and a statement that if we're going to keep half the chief's office, half the Justice Department, half of the tribal councils, if we're going to keep funding these activities, which can be, appeared obviously as a somewhat governmental function and not a program function, out of the indirect cost pool and allocate those expenses out to the programs, then we're going to have to justify it. So she's asking to reserve the burden to the tribe if all of these activities are jerked out of the indirect cost pool, then obviously we've got to provide funding for it. She's asking to go ahead and set that fund aside at this point. That's why that hasn't been ever funded in the past. This is new. It's from a recent communication, and hopefully we will successfully negotiate that and substantiate our position with the IG that the justice, the chief, as well as the tribal council do a lot of service-oriented activities with their expenditures that support the programs in either referral manner or other assistance to tribal members in utilizing these federal programs. The next division is Community Services. Community Services has 3 new initiatives for the self-help community building, $204,000. Community planning, $100,000. Community transportation. Now those were mentioned in the initiative list, and they'll be explained a little further, I believe, by the request yesterday that the administration put together a report with a synopsis or justification document for each of these new initiatives. And that's, Mr. Chair.
Oh, excuse me. Mr. Thornton.
On this real fire stations, is there anywhere else in the budget where that could have been moved to?
I didn't see it anywhere else in the budget.
No, and I do believe that that was an oversight on community services budget. This is a very positive program, and the chief does support that. So that is one of the items that we would like to discuss putting into this budget.
Okay. Mr. Soap.
I've got a question, maybe Callie. I know that in the past we've done some type of self-help community buildings, installation in various communities. And what section of the budget was that coming out of previously? Because it doesn't indicate there was any funds available in the previous 2 years. So was that?
Those generally were either Gen Fund. I believe we got an ICDBG grant one year that funded some of our community buildings, and we are requesting funds in 2008 for, I believe it's 2 buildings. And I do have the information on the new initiatives. Once we get through the overview, I'll hand those out.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Buzzard.
Callie, I didn't see anything in here for water and sanitation for individual water and sewer, because those dollars are used for emergencies and for the MAP program, for the housing authority, and the water assistance program. And we can't use IHS dollars for any of that stuff. If it's HUD funded, like even these housing units over here, we can't use any dollars for that. So I want to keep that in mind when we get to it.
Okay. Yes.
Harvey, can you go over what you were talking about one more time? Which part of it?
Well,
Was that coming out of?
Well, last year, especially out of tribal funds, last year they had funded some what we call individual water and sewer, and those dollars were used for emergencies. They were also used for the MAP program out of the housing authority, and used for the HAWSA funds for these houses that are being built for group homes. But what happens, you cannot use Indian Health Service dollars for HUD-type buildings. Also, a lot of it has to do with environmentals on IHS dollars. Sometimes you get hung up, and if you got an emergency, you absolutely can't use IHS dollars until you clear the environmental dollars.
So do we have anything in here for it?
No, there's not anything in there on that.
And that's for the individual sewers?
Individual water and sewer.
We will.
Well, no.
Planning on that. No.
We hope we have something.
Yeah, I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah, when we get to tab 9 on that. Okay.
Okay. The water and sewer, individual water and sewer program that was funded out of Gen Fund has been removed from the budget as well, $650,000. The self-help community water lines is going from 1.8 down to $1 million. Thank you. Tribal Bridge Program, that decrease is due to carryover being in 07 that came out of 06. But the annual funding amount has not changed in this budget. The bridge program.
Dr. Cox.
I just want to know real quick about the Kenwood Lagoon.
Can you speak?
Right, it's 101-2027.
We can't hear you, Brad.
The Kenwood
Lagoon, I just wanted to know what that's about.
That's an, EPC is working on, aren't they working with,
We can get some more detail when we get to community services, but, well, Harley probably knows more about it than anybody.
Do you want me to explain?
Go ahead.
What it is, we have 21 homes there in Kenwood, and the Cherokee Nation has signed an agreement to take care of the sewage system on it. What this is for a new lift station pump, and it needs to be done. I recommend that this is passed, for sure. But that's what it is.
May I ask you, do you know what the CNE inspection is?
Want me to answer that?
Okay.
The CNE inspection, from Indian Health Service, we get so much money to do food inspections for anything that's run by the tribe, such as elderly centers, hospitals, things like that. And what's happened, we've had like 7 casinos that comes online, and we haven't got an increase in Indian Health Service. They don't see it the way we see it, because we're sending people up there almost on a daily basis to inspect the food services, inspect the swimming pools, inspect the spas and stuff like that. And we don't have the staff and dollars in the IHS budget to do that. That's the reason we're asking for tribal funds to help out with that.
Okay. Yes.
And Harley, maybe you can answer it as good thing. Why wouldn't CNE reimburse the tribe for that?
We had talked about that and looked at it, because I think, and I felt like it might be a conflict of interest to where somebody's paying you to do your own inspections. So that's the reason we went ahead and asked for tribal funds for that. And it makes sense at the time I was talking about it, that if the state come and say, well, how are you funding this thing here? At least they're not funding us to inspect it.
Okay. Okay, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Page 35, basically no increase in human resources.
Yes. Excuse me.
I've got a question on 34. Under the KB housing, self-help emergency assistance. Do you know what that is? A 220,000, up to 400,000, 220,000?
That's the material-only program. I believe that
That isn't the panel housing?
emergency is...
Okay, I know what it is now.
That's the material only program.
Well, does this have anything to do with emergency housing that we're doing?
Where
or is
people-
this a different-
What line are you at?
The KD housing.
Page 34, under engineering sanitation.
Isn't it the $1,000 program? They get $1,000.
KB housing,
I don't know.
400,000, 420,000.
Again, I can get probably a better answer from community services, but I believe this is the self-help where if,
Is that the $1,000 deal?
I think so.
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
it's materials only.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Page 35, management resources. You see the drop-off of the Sequoia project that was completed for the network communication, the one-time emergency ice storm assistance. And hopefully that's a one-time thing. $500,000 increase in natural resources. This has primarily that's in the land acquisition. We have a $2 million cultural tourism carve-out for land acquisitions related to a cultural initiative by the administration. That's slightly offset by the $1.4 million reduction in the regular land acquisition account. The facilities management department has several increases and decreases, with the management resource planning budget going to zero. Building structures and property maintenance, that's a new initiative, increasing from 250, or asking for 250 new dollars. The courthouse, for the work that needs to be done for its historical status, $630,000 request. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can you tell me the difference between 101-2500 and 25-550, which is land acquisitions versus land acquisitions for cultural tourism? Tell me what the difference in those land purchases are.
Kelly.
The land acquisitions budget is set aside out of the Arkansas Riverbed settlement, and we carved out $2 million to request specifically to support the cultural tourism plan. So you see a decrease in the land acquisition and an increase in the other items.
My question is essentially though, how do you decide? How do you decide you're purchasing land? When it's purchased, does it have to be specifically for cultural tourism, or can you purchase a block of land and go back later and say, well, we're going to use it for cultural tourism? That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, the $2 million was pulled out as a separate line to be used specifically for cultural tourism. The other land purchases go through a process. We get calls all the time. People want to sell us their land, or someone refers, and there's a process to go through and evaluate those potential acquisitions.
That's what I want to know. Thanks.
I don't know of any, since this is general fund, tribal discretionary dollars, if the 2,500 account land acquisition acquired a piece of property and it was decided to use it for cultural tourism, I don't believe there'd be any legal prohibition against them doing that.
No.
I mean,
That's fine. I just want to know why the split. That answers your question. Thanks.
I think more of an administrative earmarking purpose than anything. Page 36, see a lot of the projects in facilities management, the work that's being requested to be done. A lot of these, as you can see, are continuations of the 07 that were not included in 06. We had several locations that were project-based in 07 that is winding down in the 08 budget. There's the Veterans Center and the road construction, about $530,000 increase for the new initiatives.
Dr. Cobb.
I'm sorry, and I may defer this question to Harley. You may be able to answer this. I know there's some questions on Powwow Grounds on getting some of this stuff done. I noticed on the Powwow Grounds budget it went down by $230,000.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know the full details on that, Bob. What it was proposed at first, of what I remember when I left, that they were going to take the sewer and put it back into the sewer system over at Sequoia. What that would require is a fairly large lift station to have a force main. So that's what the big budget was for in 07. I don't think that's been done. It hasn't been completed, as far as I know. So I don't know why, unless they've got other plans to do it. They haven't talked to me about it.
Will somebody be here that's all I want. When somebody comes in, okay, that's fine, thanks.
Yeah, which is why I said if we wait till we get to those tabs, and then we'll have someone from that department here to answer the questions. Excuse me, Mr. Snell.
Okay.
This item here, Leach Industrial Building, what is that?
Looks like a property tax. $61. It's more likely just a property tax on it.
They're my house.
I wouldn't have said that.
Okay. There's nothing other significant on the rest of that page 36.
We're going to get that started.
You're not going to go through
Okay.
Moving right along. The Commerce Services has a slight 4% increase, with the majority of that on the cultural tourism budget from that Small Business Assistance Center utilizes. The Human Services Department has the Meth Reduction Family Initiative for the ICW children as a 19% increase, $258,000, and that's a protected custody. The one below it, the PR, it gets cut off, and the one below it looks just like it. It says Meth Reduction Family Initiative ICW-PR. I believe that has to do with the protective service.
Mr. Baker.
County, If I could. There's a line item here for domestic violence shelters, and I guess actuals in '06 was $38,000. I know that we've asked in the chief's donations budget for $50,000. Do you know how that's broken down?
In the donations, I can borrow
It just says domestic shelters, $50,000.
Oh, the detail isn't in there.
Huh?
Is the detail not in?
I did not find it.
Okay, I will call Ginger, and I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, if you could, please.
The removal of the clothing for kids budget.
Excuse me. It was domestic violence shelters, the middle of page 37.
They had zeroed it out. But I did notice in the chief's budget for donations that they put a $50,000 in. And I'm trying to find out where that money's going, breakdown of the 50.
Okay, Shirley.
Okay. The item below that you see is the clothing for kids is not in the '08 budget. The next item that sticks out is the stoves, heating assistance, out of family and elderly assistance that's not in the budget as well. And both of these will be in the human service group when we get into that. The language and culture child care out of Gen Fund is up in their budget request by $60,000 or almost a third of their travel funding. The government resource does not have a significant move in its request. It does have a digitization project in the real estate service department, which more information will be provided on that, and a reduction of the tribal trust land lease applications from 125,000 down to 20,000. The next items that stand out in career services is the reduction of the IHP employment training, going from 369 down to 280, and then the Boys and Girls Club being removed. We talked about that yesterday, about the removal of the Boys and Girls Club, and when we get into career services. That Talking Lead Job Corps has its initiative for its new computers in here, $150,000, and that pretty well completes the general fund overview. Motor fuels tax is quite a bit shorter than that. We just went through the general fund and it's 10 pages. So motor fuels has got a couple of pages here. Not a lot of significant movement on motor fuels tax this year from in the past. We got some real slight movements. The higher education scholarship reduction of $484,000 is largely due to that one-time funding in a one-time supplement in '07. And as you recall, when in '07, you may recall, we put $875,000 into scholarships a couple of months ago, and there was a question whether $575,000 had already been subsidized to the scholarships for all the unfunded applicants. And it in fact was already in the budget, and the $875 was added on top of that. So that's why we're seeing a reduction of funding in '08. The direct care health service, slight increase for the Bonita Clinic, 5%, and you can see the interest increase of the motor fuel tax interest income, what it's used. The cemetery preservation is the only thing that really stuck out to me was the removal of that funding, the $102,000 at the bottom of that page. Page 40, road.
Yes.
Kelly, is that someplace else?
No, sir, that is not. Out of the 102 in 2007, approximately 27,000 has been expended. I would expect to bring forward carryover on that project. So I think there will be carryover funds available to continue that in '08. Yes, as of, right, I looked it up a couple of days ago.
Yes.
So if we've used 27, we're going to carry over
70.
Yeah, 75,000.
75. Normally, what we do on these motor fuel tax accounting units, because they're very project-oriented, the group will submit a budget in the first or second mod of the year to bring forward their carryover.
And it goes back to these budgets have been prepared in a lot of cases in May and June. And it's kind of hard to predict out 4.5 months what your carryover is going to be, but with the project-based funding like this particular one is, it makes it real easy to see what your actual expenditure and encumbrance when you get close to the end of September, and submitting a carryover budget is relatively painless and expedient. And I think that's a good practice, instead of putting brand new dollars on top of something you know you've got a significant carryover coming.
Mr. England.
Doug, is this part, or Callie, is this part of the cemetery preservation, is this part of the cemetery that people apply for more money to get them up and running, and then they go on to the $500 a year?
It's the $500.
Do we still have a program where people apply for to get them up in shape, but pensions and dates, and, when it really ran down for that?
I'll defer to people administering this, because I'm not that familiar with whether they're utilizing this funds for that same.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you.
Page 40. That go ahead and flows down through to the community service total of $102,000 decrease. Slight increase on the food distribution's cash match. As that funding increases for the food distribution program, then the cash match requirement increases too. So it's good to see these cash matches requirements going up. And the minor emergency repair, which I know you spent a lot of time yesterday on that, that's at the bottom. The indirect cost pool, if you go through this report, the first page, you see pretty much, compared to 07 budget, a flat budget. There's not significant increases other than,
Yes.
And Sharon Lane's going to be over here to talk about that thing, right?
When we get to that portion.
the chief's budget has a 17% increase on its budget. I believe there's a staff, one person, that's affecting some of that. 12% on communication, and the rest of those are real nominal. The next page, page 42, City Education Department's requesting an increase in the executive director budget of 80%. This is a significant increase, and I'll address that later in the education review. Health staying relatively flat, controller staying flat. You'll see the increase in the indirect cost recovery. The IDC pool's recovery is budgeted to break even with the pool. Okay, so if the pool budget's $21 million in all these departments here, on these 4 pages, then the recovery is going to be $21 million. That's why that one report looked a little distorted that Callie talked to y'all about, that BLA 99 report that showed all the funding sources, because the indirect cost recovery comes in and offsets the indirect cost pool's expenses. But all the other funding sources over there in that one column that said indirect costs, they budget their rate. So they're going to pay the rate, but the pool's going to budget to break even. So if the funded rate is kicking in $25 million of 17% indirect cost, and the pool's budgeting $22 million, we've got a $3 million budgeted surplus in the indirect cost pool, or for indirect cost funding. Okay, we're anticipating an over recovery. So that kind of hopefully that helps put a few of those dots together. That's why these big credits are in here. So,
and I think we talked a little bit, but what's the philosophy behind that? Is it probably collecting interest off of that, or I mean, if it turns out that percentage is actually closer to 19 or 23.
If our actual,
What does that mean? I mean, there was a couple of years I noticed on that one slide that we were, 3 million over in the hole or 2.5 or something like that. And is that
yeah, the philosophy is when we budget the indirect cost pool to break even, and we budget all the programs to pay a stated rate, a negotiated rate, then we're going to have to compare what amount of funding the programs are providing to pay for all these overheads or these indirect costs. Now, if we actually experience, let's say, a 20% effective IDC rate, but we've only budgeted a 17% rate, we're going to have a significant under-recovery, which can create a cash flow problem.
What are the consequences of that? I mean,
well, negative cash is one consequence. That's why we have a cash reserve, a line of credit authorized for this type of stuff. We have
borrow to cover that, essentially.
we fund that shortfall ourselves
Yeah.
out of our own cash reserves. And to just the opposite, when we have an over-recovery, then obviously we're going to have we're going to have 2 years down the road when that's going to offset.
That's what it looks like to me in the training.
That's why it's a 2-year moving average.
This year it could be, for whatever reason, I don't quite understand why we don't just budget 19 or something like that, but, whenever we, like you said, budget 20 or...
Well, and here's the problem. I see where you're going. The problem is all the programs don't spend their budget. So they may all budget a base of a $200 million base, which means that's their total expenses that are subject to indirect costs that we would apply the 19% to. Well, if they don't spend their budget, then we've applied the budgeted rate to a pool anticipating X number of dollars to be funded for that pool, and we don't receive it. All of a sudden, we've got an unbudgeted under recovery. So, to minimize that risk to negative cash flow, we budget our rate and we budget the pool to break even. That way, we don't give this arbitrary surplus because we've got this big base out here. Everybody's budgeting all their federal dollars. Knowing good well they're going to carry over a significant amount. We budget the pool to break even, and that is in my opinion, that is a conservative move. Did that help? This is a difficult subject to took me a long time before I understood it. If I even do now. It's an overhead burden. The next page 43. You'll see information systems, which is a heavily funded department. You'll see they have $6 million request out of 20. They have increases in their operational budget. Their network and internet system has an increase. The financial system has an increase, and I believe that financial system increase has to do with the Lawson upgrade. And isn't the Lawson upgrade, our financial system upgrade coming online in 08? Isn't that why the financial system has a 17% increase? I noticed some communications going out that we're going to upgrade, step up Lawson's to a new release.
We're in the process of doing that.
That is true. We are upgrading our financial system. This particular department has experienced significant growth in the last 4, 5, 6 years. And it's a direct proportion to the employment growth. As you saw on some of my earlier charts, total Cherokee Nation charts, the significant growth of the organization and the support service that this department has to support has had to grow along with it. 17% increase in asset management and facilities. Slight increases, straight 5%, right down the board for acquisition, support services, risk management. Human services also staying at a 5% increase, and on down through government resources. And that completes the indirect cost pool. Any questions on that funding source? Motor vehicle tax. The law enforcement is apportioned by legislation. The tag office actually has a 4% decrease in its budget. You see a decrease in the motor vehicle tax Sequoia High School of $70,000. The 07 budget had actually, I believe, a significant amount of carryover, actually 06 apportionment coming into 07. A lot of this particular funding source, again, is dictated by legislation and compact. The enterprise is the next budget or funding source. The Tahlequah Extended Care budget is being removed. The Jollagee Apartments is coming into the budget in 08. The landfill's 7%.
Yes.
It went from 0 to 440. What's the county? Can you tell us what's going on there?
It was not budgeted in 07 because we were operating under an MOA with the Housing Authority, and we're going through and updating that MOA, and I just advised them to go ahead and submit a budget to be on the safe side. So it's always been there. It was just operating differently a couple of years there.
Is that budget, it sounds like it's just being moved from one place to another.
Right.
But is that budget consistent with what it was, say, last year?
Yes. That is the apartment project in Sallisaw. It's fairly flat. It operates pretty much at a break even, and that's the 202 housing project.
I thought we were taking in pretty well what we were taking is
yes.
what we're using.
That's okay. Right.
Yes.
Landfill. I have a question on where are we budgeting for?
We own the landfill as a
I
tribal.
thought ICI was there.
I believe that's a management contract.
Yes.
We've always continued to budget the landfill. ICI is operating under a management contract, so this reflects the projected revenues coming in and the expenditures.
Okay, so we get this on that, right?
This is the expected budget for 2008, yes.
Okay,
The
so
revenue and
2007 we all got
expenditures.
back, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Ms. Watts, you good?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The Small Business Assistance Center is reducing its intermediary relending program, basically doing away with it. Now wasn't that USDA funded? Was that
Yes.
USDA dollars
That was a
coming into
grant
this?
we received, and they're projecting to lend all those funds out in 07. The program will be continuing, but I believe they've loaned most of that out.
So we may expect to see a intermediary relending program coming back in, budget coming back in if we can get
If we get another
grant
grant.
from USDA.
Yeah.
This program is pending completion until we get further federal funding. DOI Self-Governance Compact. Page 47, you'll see the Arkansas Riverbed Project being removed from the budget. The Competitive Project and Environmental Protection Commission.
I just had a
Yes.
question on, now, Arkansas Riverbed's coming out of the budget. We don't know whether it's just discontinued is it just done, or being moved to another department, or is it somewhere else?
It is not in there. It is earmarked funds in our compact. So probably what we will do is submit a mod. There was no budget submitted. This has been fairly inactive the last 2 or 3 years, and I think it's a matter of realigning where that reports and who's going to be in charge of it.
Do we even have anybody over there now, or what's our,
Troy Wayne was kind of the administrator for that, and of course he's on the court now, so
okay, so he's leaving that, going to the court?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Moving into the legal resource out of the compact, the Marshal Service is requesting a 21% increase, or $227,000. I'm on page 47, about 2/3 of the way down in legal resource.
Can you say that again? They're asking for an increase
Yes,
of 21%?
yes.
You want for?
I believe there is a budget mod that was just in this, either this one that you passed Monday or the month before. This funding source is from DOI, but is also where they account for additional funds they get from C&E for providing security services. I can double check it, but I believe the 08 budget is more in line with what the 07 is after the mod that you just approved.
Mr. Thornton?
Is there anywhere in here, is there a running total of what the Marshal Service actually gets?
When you get to the group,
Yeah, my group report will summarize the whole operation.
Receive from the housing authority, and they receive out of this budget?
when you get to the group, review, it'll show all the funding sources that go into that program.
Thank you.
Okay, we move into page 48. You see the removal of the mineral assessment program and the 2007 energy and mineral development. Were those earmarked funding when they came down for the specific projects?
I'll confirm that.
Okay, I think they are. I know that the decrease in the noxious weed is an earmarked program, which means it's specific funding coming down from DOI in our compact, but is not discretionary. They fund it through the compact, but it's specifically for that. When we say earmarked compact funding, that's what that means. It's not subject to reallocation by the tribe. No change in the Small Business Assistance Center of compact funds. Human Services has not changed their budget at all, from Children, Youth, Family Services, as well as Family and Elderly Assistance departments. The Government Resource Department has not changed its budget request out of the compact. Real Estate Services has a 1% increase, and Career Services has not changed its budget request. So all these budgets are staying relatively flat. And if you want to see how they're compared to 06, go to the next columns to the right.
Year before last, I believe in Indian Child Welfare, we needed to add some funding to that, and now I see that it's decreased from the actuals in 06. How come that decrease?
Well, as you recall, the general fund, we took discretionary funds and supplemented that program under that meth initiative under the ICW, and that. So we did a 07. We did a funding shift where we actually reduced this ICW program's compact funds and replaced it with tribal dollars.
Then will they have any additional funds in here anywhere except this only place that it shows Indian Child Welfare?
They have 1.5 million more funds out of gen fund than they had in '06 for all of the tribal funded children, youth, family service, which includes ICW.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the last item, page 50, housing rehab office for the HIP. You know, we talked about the HIP not being in here, going to reapply. Are we going to?
Mr. Chairman, we got some information on the HIP budget. Stan Hummingbird, who runs this program, the 2008 HIP funding was originally removed from the President's budget. It's still in discussions at Congress whether or not those funds would be put back in, but that's why no budget was submitted for 2008. In 2007, they're operating off of their '06 and '07 allocation. So once we know more about the '08 funding, we would probably be bringing that in a mod.
Thank you. That brings us to IHS. IHS, the number 30 funding sources are discretionary. It's our interest income on our compact. We isolate that funding source just to book the interest. Maybe in the future we might entertain, since it's really a non-purpose, I mean, it's really not serving any purpose since we're transferring those funds to why don't we transfer those to the gen fund out? Now that we started that practice, would it be prudent to do away with that funding source? And just book the interest in gen fund? You can't?
We can't just book the interest in the gen fund. We have to report it in the IHS funding source.
Well, yeah, I don't mean do away with the accounting unit.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead and book the interest there, but do away with the funding source.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
And roll that accounting unit up underneath the 331s.
Yeah.
Just so these funding sources, you know, they can grow. It's just that.
Yeah.
Cross the line, Callie. I apologize.
Yeah.
That's your. Okay. The 800,000 is the interest income we budget. Number 32 funding source is our compact. You see the group leader has a $2.7 million decrease compared to last year, and that's due to the Muskogee Clinic funding of $4.9 million for the equipment. Slightly offset by an increase in health equipment replacement reserve of 1.9. That nets $3 million, and you can see that 2.7 is going down to the bottom. Clinical support services, the only significant increase there on the compact is the clinical support. It's 21% increase, $207,000. Administrative support, the MIS, again, the information systems departments, the technology department in health is requesting a 20% increase off their compact funding level of last year. The direct care is all the clinic budgets. Now, I want to explain that this looks a little busy on this schedule, because you'll notice that on the actual side of '06, all of these clinic departments that they operate, and they have, you know, some very specific functional departments in our clinics, they all book their actuals to those departments for their, because they'll take this budget, for instance, like Stillwell right here has $11.1 million budget. Well, they have that broke down by department, because they're going to be they're going to be booking all their actuals by department. And maybe in the future, is there an opportunity, Callie, for possibly these clinics to start utilizing some of the activities in Lawson instead of accounting units for these departmental expenses, where we won't have this type of comparison when we're analyzing the clinical budgets?
We can review that. Basically, when health prepares their budget, they look at it by clinic and prepare one budget for the entire clinic. And then during the year, as Doug said, they manage it by department. So we can look at revising some of our systems and to make it a little more.
Maybe use the activity.
Yeah.
Possibly. If you don't mind looking into it, it might help some of these system reports. 9% increase at Stillwell. Again, this is compact funding. 10% increase at Southsoft. 11% increase at J, 11% increase at Salina, moving into page 54, 14% at Nowata. Obviously, you see the big Muskogee number there that's driving the significant increase. Bartlesville, relatively flat. Yes, sir.
Yes. 3324500 optometry at the very last, right under Bartlesville records. What is that optometry?
Where that is?
Because we don't have any optometry in Bartlesville.
No, that doesn't have anything to do with Bartlesville.
I believe that's the allocation for optometry for each of the clinics that have, if you look up,
That have an optometry
I believe that
department.
is.
So that's all.
I think they're consolidating all the
I think they're
optometry departments.
consolidating all the optometry for budget purposes.
Okay.
But health will be able to clarify.
That's not NSU, is it?
That's probably.
I think it's NSU because I'm seeing optometry in each of these other lines.
Yeah, for the actual.
Did we do a partnership with NSU several
Right.
years ago?
I think that's what this is.
NSU provides a lot of the optometry services.
So they may get referrals from all the clinics.
Right.
I think
That's why they didn't allocate that out to all the clinical budgets. It's probably a centralized delivery location. Community health. Where am I at? Wait a minute, what page? We're on page 54, right? 54. Yes. Okay, sorry. Community health preventive service, slight increase on the behavioral health program, and the ambulance service has a significant increase, 24% on the ambulance service from $3.2 to $4 million. And in the health, I don't know why it's going up that much, but it's a significant increase in the operations of the ambulance service, and I'm sure it has to do with broader coverage areas
But we'll look into that back here.
in the health. The next funding, let's see, no, the next page wraps it up with a decrease in the chronic care pilot project. That was new 2007 pilot project for chronic care. And the total you can see is an 18% increase on our compact funding. I believe the majority of that increase is the funding for the Muskogee Clinic. And we will see significant increases in our third-party billing activities because the Muskogee's coming online. But keep in mind that all that is budgeted, and a portion of that is obligated by our public offering on our bond issue for debt service. The next funding source is 33, it's relatively short, the environmental health funding from our compact. We're seeing a 13% increase in the Environmental Protection Commission, with most of that being in the water sanitation environmental reviews, going from 74 to 88. And we have a $600,000 increase in environmental health service funded projects, 4.5 to slightly over 5.1 million. 10% funding total for our environmental health activities. This is a significant increase over what we spent in '06. As you'll notice, this is almost double what we actually spent just last year. Now, I don't know if these environmental health projects are, if our funding is actually increased over what we anticipated, or these projects take multi-year to finish. You know, they take 2 years to complete. I'm curious. What I'm curious about, the reason I'm bringing this up is we've got $3.6 million expended, thank you, in '06. And what I want to look at is the environmental health budget for '06 and see if they typically spend or budget $7 million, but they can only spend so much. If they budget their entitlement and we have carryover, like roads, if this is similar, just a much smaller scale than the roads department.
And most projects are multi-funded year projects, which means they last up to 3 to 4 years at a time, and some of those are carryover dollars from the previous year. I think that's probably what Doug comes from. And most of those projects are coming down to be earmarked once they come out of the IHS.
Community services, convenience, sanitation.
Pretty handy to have in our house.
Yeah.
You're right. Their budget for expenses for '06 was $9.8 million, and they expended 4.7. So
And usually
exactly
those
right.
funds are what we call ex-year funds or the previous year funds. You don't get them until a year later. That's what we call a multi-year funding funds.
Okay. We're almost finished with this. One last discretionary type funding source is 34, and it's the IHS Self-Governance Office. And it has slightly less than $500,000 budget every year, and it doesn't really move. You see that it hasn't really changed. That completes the review of the funding source detail, the detail by funding source. Okay, now what we've looked at now is we've looked at our discretionary funds that we can do something with, and we've looked at it by each pot of money that's discretionary. Next, we'll look at each organizational group, and all the pots of money that they're spending will be underneath their group. So now we've got to turn the hat around and not necessarily look at it from where our money's coming from, but where it's going to be expended from.
We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10:30.